We've all experienced stress and the negative impacts it has on our lives. In today's video, interview-styled video, we'll be delving a little bit deeper into stress, the negative effects of stress, and maybe a few things that we can do about it, as well as looking at body stress release as a stress management option. My name is Ralph Dinkelman. I am a body stress release practitioner, and hopefully you get something out of today's video.
Hello everyone, and a happy 2021 to you. Welcome to our very first episode of this year's Lift as We Rise webinar series. And this afternoon, you're joining us for our very first episode in a new series called Future Thrive Business. Future Thrive Business is going to be featuring niche, unique businesses right here in South Africa, and particularly in the Eastern Cape, where our service providers and business owners are doing something different and unique that is ready for the new normal. So this afternoon, I have the pleasure of speaking with Ralph Dinkelman, who is a BSR, Body Stress Release Practitioner based in Port Elizabeth. Myself, as someone who works in front of the laptop quite often and also does some recreational cycling, I have used Ralph as my go-to person for a number of years now and found tremendous benefit. So please lean in, listen to our podcast today, and I hope that for your optimal health, you take something away from today's conversation. So Ralph, it's an absolute honor to speak with you this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ralph, the terminology, body stress release, or BSR as it's known, is quite specific. So in the context of BSR, what does stress refer to?
Stress, what they mean there is really just the locked-in stress. So when a part of the body becomes overstressed, that area will then try to protect itself, and so it tightens up. And as we build up these stresses, often they get stored. So we basically looking at releasing those stored tensions.
Fantastic. It sounds like quite an interesting process. And is it something that relies on the body's intelligence or the feedbacks you receive? How do you identify where the stresses are and what helps to unlock those stresses?
We basically do stress tests on the body. So if I do a test on the body and it overreacts, I know there's a locked-in stress there. So we have a way of ascertaining the client and doing tests on them to see where their overreactions are to stress. So basically, if a muscle is normal and you just give it an input, it will just adapt to it and respond normally. But if there's locked-in stress, it will tighten up more. So that's how we then know.
Well, Ralph, this is quite a unique and specialized therapy. Let's start with your journey. What led you to find BSR, and what gives you the confidence that this helps you serve your purpose in the healthcare space?
It started when I actually had 2 whiplash accidents. The one, and then a year later, before that had fully healed, I had another whiplash accident. And basically what happened was I went to the physio and the chiro, and they did help, and I reached a point where what they were doing was helping, but it wasn't the breakthrough that I was needing to get the full healing. So often after a chiro session, or it would just tighten up again afterwards. By chance, I happened to go to a body stress release practitioner here in PE, and what happened was, in the beginning I thought, wow, how can this work? It's such a light release. What's this going to do? And yet I could feel something change in the body, in where it was, instead of tensing up more with the treatment, but the next day I could feel a releasing process, and that's really what started my journey. Today I still have neck problems, I still have to watch it, but it's been a process, and I understand my body better now as well. So in that way, I know how to work with my own body, if that makes any sense.
So Ralph, I picked up on the fact that you found your own BSR practitioner in Port Elizabeth.
Yes.
So it means the practice has been established and has been used for a number of years now. I also understand that BSR was birthed in South Africa. Is that correct?
Yes, sure. I've been doing it for 17 years now, and she was here for about 5 years before that. So it's been going for quite a long time. I don't know the exact date. It's been going for at least 30 years.
No, I mean, that's quite fantastic that South Africa can claim this modality that's now being used internationally. And I think in our preamble, you were sharing with me that, was it in the Netherlands, that they are quite supportive of BSR as a preventative treatment, and it's also covered by the medical aids quite extensively over there. Is that correct?
Yes. The medical aids all supported there. The reason why is it's actually helping reduce medical costs because, you know, if your stress is down, then your body just functions generally better. And a lot of times the stress can be the problem, but now we're treating the blood pressure or we're treating the eczema or, you know, so if we have less background stress in the system, everything works better.
Yeah, so Ralph, I mean, over 2020, I think what really struck a lot of us is that there is certainly a place and the time has come for taking active steps in your own capacity towards your wellness to sustain optimal health care, right?
Yes.
So help us understand from your perspective how you see health and wellness being interrelated.
It's quite interesting with the whole COVID thing that's happened. You know, it's all the countries which have the highest healthcare costs, which are having the highest amount of fatalities. Basically, we are treating the diseases, but we're not looking at health. We're trying to fix certain conditions, whereas if we're looking to increase our wellness, everything functions better. For instance, if you look at diet, what a big role it plays, and yet a lot of people that are suffering from, say, eczema or something, don't see that connection. We need to look at the body as a whole. Granted, that's very difficult because it's so very, very complex. But if one could try to understand the body better and then try to get that intuitive, because there's an intelligence running the body, then I think we can listen to our own intuition as to what is best for us. But if your body's very run down and the intelligence is clouded, it's very difficult to hear that what is good for you, right? So I think if we can try to build that inner knowingness in the body, but that is also a process. So yes, we can lean more towards that. If I had to say somebody is really well, what would that mean? It would mean that that person has the ability to express their life more fully, how they're meant to. And the more well you are, the more spontaneous your reactions can be, whereas the more unwell you are, the more it limits your actions, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph. You've actually articulated that so beautifully, because in times like these where there's so much uncertainty around, that uncertainty itself packs an added layer of stress, and you use the word complexity, and to try and identify that can sometimes be quite difficult in itself. So how would someone know that BSR is the right go-to treatment for them versus, let's say, for example, going to a physiotherapist or a chiropractor or even going for a therapeutic massage?
Well, I think the first thing is you will know when there is that feeling of stress. Now, the best way I can try to explain that is if you, for instance, have a job or you have a day where you've got too much to do. You've got to do this, you've got to do this, and then suddenly your boss says, no, you've got to do this and this as well, and then plus there's something that goes wrong. It's almost like you don't have enough time to fully do everything that you need to do. And in the same way, the body, in all the functions it needs to do, it's almost like it doesn't have enough time to process all the things it needs to do. So when we are overstressed, there's a contraction, there's too many things trying to happen at the same time. Body stress release will, in effect, allow the system to calm down so that it opens up the space more for the body to start doing things in a more kind of organized way. A physiotherapist, although they would probably de-stress the system in their own way, but they're focusing on the joints or the muscles specifically. And if the person is stressed, those muscles won't necessarily let go. The other thing that we really focus on is really allowing for healing to occur, the body has to go into a healing state. And the healing state cannot happen when we are stressed. If you look at it from a cell's point of view, if a cell is in a stressed state, what happens is it puts borders around it and its environment, or the body or the organism puts borders around it to protect itself from the environment. When we are healing and growing, we need to open ourselves up to the environment, so they're two different states. So we're trying to get into the healing state and allow the body to relax and therefore to encourage the self-healing to happen.
Fantastic, Ralph. So when a patient comes to you or a client comes to you, what would that experience feel like? What can they expect?
I'll work on them, on the muscles. It's meant to be a very light way of encouraging the body to release. So I'm not going to try and release a tight muscle. What I like to think of body stress release is I will give the impulses for the body. I will find out, first of all, where the stresses are, and then I will start the releasing process in the right direction. But I will only start the process. The body needs to actually say, I don't need that stress anymore, and it will let go. In other kinds of modalities, there would be more of this is too tight, we have to find a way to loosen it, if the body wants to or not. Obviously, if tissue's been tight for a very, very long time, that's its new normal. We do need to give it a bit of encouragement because it's very tight. So we have to give it the energy so that it can release. So it is a firm but gentle way of working with the body. The intention is always to work with the body.
Yeah. So Ralph, what conditions are appropriate to consider BSR as a treatment, and which conditions require the standard medical intervention as a starting point before they can come to BSR?
Well, I think with any very acute condition, you really need to get medical advice. The doctors have studied diagnostics. I'm not a qualified doctor. It is helpful to go the medical route. However, often we find that a person with pain, or for instance, sciatica is a common example, where the sciatic nerve, there's nothing wrong with the nerve. There's nothing wrong necessarily with the back. There's not actually a bulging disc or anything, but the stress in the system is not allowing the nerve to release. And when they take x-rays or whatever and everything seems fine, but you're still in pain, there's another thing at play here. To answer that in a concise way, I would definitely say, you don't want to have a life-threatening condition and now you're trying to self-heal when the body's not able to. So really, the medical route is important, but once you've gone on the medical route and you just see that actually it is helping, but it's not getting to the root problem, then we have to find other ways of dealing with the problem. So, for instance, often people with asthma, for instance, some people, they get the asthma pumps and it just works fantastically. This drug just clears up the airways. But if there's a condition where they're stressed and they're not breathing properly, how is the drug going to help them breathe properly if they're not actually using the apparatus of the body in the way it was designed? So I think it's a little bit of both. It's dangerous to just say these wellness guys and just put all your eggs in one basket. I think it is important to understand what the problem is. But then I think we should all, if your body's stressed, releasing the stress in the system is going to help the medical drugs even work better, possibly. So, we have to find that balance with ourselves, I think.
Yeah, so Ralph, you mentioned the respiratory example, and that, of course, is one of the symptoms of COVID and coronavirus. And even though you tested negative after having recovered from it, there could potentially be some compromises to your respiratory system still, some tightness, for example. So have you had any cases in the last year where you've treated some patients or clients who are in the COVID recovery and recuperation process? And can you maybe share with us what you found?
Well, I just had one client. We refer to them as clients more than patients, because patients are more the medical way of looking at it. So, yeah, it was just this case of exhaustion, and the whole system was depleted. So with the body stress release, what we helped the body to do was come out of the stress mode. When the body is in a state of trying to protect itself, it's feeling threatened, it's going to die. It can't just relax and breathe normally. It just can't do that. And it can get locked into the sympathetic state, which is this fight and flight. It gets into that state, and then because it's in that state, it almost like keeps it in that state. So the releases help to switch it out of that state into a more relaxed state. And then also when the client feels safe again, what happens is the person feels more supported, and so suddenly it doesn't have to feel it needs to protect itself so much. And that automatically brings about a sense of, wow, there's somebody or something that, it's not just me fighting the rest of the universe kind of thing. It's now, there's something working with me, and it's able to let go more and trust more.
Okay, so Ralph, we've spoken a lot about acute cases. And I, for example, have personally come to you for sports injuries, tension caused as a result of spending way too much time in front of your laptop and on the desk. What about chronic conditions and fatal accidents and the consequences of that? So, for example, you've shared with us that you had your own injuries, and up to today, the condition hasn't completely been eliminated, but BSR helps to treat it and prevent further aggravation. Can you talk to us about those more serious conditions?
If we understand that the body is self-healing, so if you cut yourself after 2 or 3 weeks, you can see it's healed, right? It's not bleeding anymore. There's a scar that's formed. It's healing, and yet, if we really believe that we're self-healing, then we shouldn't really have any conditions that last longer than 3 weeks at least, or each cell in the body gets renewed every 7 years. So why do these conditions continue? That's the question. And the interesting thing is that we carry our stresses with us. So a very interesting example I can just mention is when you get a tattoo, for instance. Your skin renews every 7 years, or should much sooner than that. Why is it permanent? The reason why is that it is actually a locked-in stress. The ink that gets pregnated into the skin, the body forms a capsule around it. When those cells die, another one forms around it. So these holding mechanisms go with us. The body's not just going to let them go. It has to overcome them before it can let them go. So unless we've totally overcome our stresses and we have become stronger through those stresses, we will carry those stresses with us until we die. What happens in a very strong, for instance, say an accident, the body's gone through a tremendous trauma, and of course the area starts locking in because it tries to protect. But daily life carries on, so we need to still walk, we need to still work. So what happens is the body finds other ways and compensates for that. And unfortunately, it's these compensation patterns, because the body's now so good at doing it that way, that the original stresses never let go. And because that area is now locked in and tight, it actually tends to grow over the years because you must remember, in the body, everything's moving. The parts that are not moving and the parts are moving, it's the stress between those areas which it needs to then protect more and more and more. What tends to then happen is that compensatory action, it starts interfering with other areas, and that's when we start getting pain and stuff. So often, we have clients that have had an accident when they were children and it's only affecting them now. So in my case, the weakness that it caused in my neck ligaments, I don't think it's fully released yet. So I'm still working with it, strengthening my neck, keeping it flexible, and I just have to not overstress it.
Yeah, Ralph, I understand what you're saying if one thinks about holding patterns. And if you, for example, even on a physical level, in sports, they advocate that you do cross-training or incorporate stretches with your cardio activity and really not overdo something. And I guess in the case of work-related stresses that are placed on your body, it's also the repetitive patterns that one needs to be aware of and counteract in the most optimal way. So if I consider BSR then, are there any complementary treatments or practices that one should do after the session that one has with yourself?
Yes, well, it really depends on the state of the system. So if the system is in overwhelm, like say now you've just worked through a very traumatic event, you would first wait until the body's ready to recuperate. That's really, we want to go at the level that the body's at. But at a certain point, for the muscles to let go, they need to strengthen up. They can't let go if they're too weak. So we do need to find ways of strengthening. The other thing about muscles, a muscle on its own can't get its original length back. It has to work another muscle to stretch. So stretching is really a good way of getting all the muscles back to the original length. So if you only bending your arm like this, but you never straighten it, over time you will see you can't straighten your arm anymore. To keep maximum full range of motion, it's important to do these things, definitely. Stretching, strengthening. The body needs movement. It loves movement. It doesn't like it not moving because movement actually pumps the fluids through the body. A lot of problems occur when we choose sedentary. It's a well-known fact. We have to find what works for us. That's really the key. So if you choose sedentary, find a way of movement, obviously at the right amount. If you are a very active person, then maybe you need to relax more. Or maybe if you're only doing cardio, maybe you need to do strength training as well. Or maybe if you only cycle, maybe you should think of walking or swimming as well. In the beginning I said the most healthiest being is the one that is the most spontaneous, that at a given time can move in the most different directions. So if we only do certain actions, we're going to do those actions well at the expense of other actions. So to keep ourselves more well-rounded, we need to find those things that keep us more rounded.
Ralph, it's really interesting listening to you because my brain's connecting this to the business example, and we're talking about stresses, holding patterns, agility, flexibility, and really building the body's resilience.
Yes.
So what I'm hearing is a client would decide for themselves, hey, I want to go and check this out and see if it assists.
Yes.
After the medical route has been followed in a serious case.
Yes.
And then depending on what signals you're picking up from the body, what the body's information is, what it's conveying to you, you're going to be doing the BSR technique. And then once the 45-minute session is over, then you would recommend or suggest what should be done till the next session. Is that correct?
Yes. Look, in the beginning, when the body's in overwhelm, if you're in an overwhelmed situation, your clarity is not there in your thinking, in your perceptions even, because everything's clouded. There's, again, too many things trying to happen at the same time. So in the beginning, when the body is very overwhelmed, it's very difficult for the body to, or the person to get an innate sense what they need, because it's unbalanced. The more it comes to balance, the easier you will see what's keeping it out of balance. In the beginning, I think rather resting more than trying to do more things, more and more things. Once that sort of initial kind of state of balance has occurred, your body will tell you what it needs. You will know. And even if you make the wrong decision, when you make the wrong decision, you will know afterwards that that was the wrong decision, right? And I think getting somebody else to make those decisions for us, we've taken away the intelligence that we have within us, you know. And I think we so often think, no, the doctor's the expert, or I'm the expert with stress. But actually, you're the expert with your own body, and you need to find a way where you understand your body better so that you can find the most efficient way that you can work with it. And that's really what my ultimate message is to people, is to really try to find their own way. I try to help them, but I always say, you know, take what I say with a pinch of salt. Your body actually will tell you much quicker than what I will, and more accurately.
You know, one of the things you said right at the beginning was that BSR is a holistic treatment. So you've referred to the physical aspect quite a lot, and we've touched on the mental aspect, i.e. using the body's intelligence, etc., and the stresses. What about the emotional aspect?
Emotions are really the way in which you emote what you think. So it's the body emoting what you're thinking. So it's a way of expressing what you're thinking through emotions. And when that happens, the brain releases neuropeptides. So if you're angry, for instance, a whole lot of angry neuropeptides will be streaming through the system. And then what happens is those chemicals, it's like you could even say a drug, but it's actually neuropeptides, hormones in the system. Now, when we're very stressed and when we have old neuropeptides from 2 weeks ago still active in the body, you can understand how that can cause the emotions not to be fully direct as what you're experiencing now. So you could be experiencing anger from a way back because those neuropeptides are still stuck in the system. Right. So with body stress release, what often happens is old emotions get released from the tissue. And not necessarily that you have to now analyze why am I angry or anything. It's just the neuropeptides releasing from the system. And then also, once the body finds a more balanced state, and there's not that so many things happening all at the same time, what happens is it's almost like the emotional system almost slows down, and you are then able to go through the emotions fully, in a sense. So releasing the stress and actually sort of, in a way, expanding the time to experience each emotion, instead of trying to experience 20,000 emotions plus 20 from the past, allows your emotional experience to be more integrated into what you are about now, I would say.
Well, Ralph, so I understand why you use the term complexity right up front. It explains it. So let's take an example where someone comes to explore BSR. Yes. They come for one session. And for whatever reason, they may choose not to continue. All these potential releases that take place, what would then happen if they were not to come back? Does it cause any harm, or is it manageable?
No, the body will just start tightening up again. Right. So this is the thing with body stress release, is that we are working with the body, and when the body decides it doesn't need that protective mechanism, it will start letting it go. If it doesn't, it won't let go. A lot of the releases won't happen overnight. The body won't be ready. Sooner or later, something that the body thought was important to protect suddenly realized, but hang on, it's not that important, and it starts letting them go. And as those layers then release, so you go deeper and deeper into the system. But often I see clients that have had a lot of locked-in stress, and suddenly there's a system here which is working with the body, and so the body over lets go. It's been fighting the the rest of all these other modalities and things trying to force it to let go, now suddenly there's something that is working with it. It can overcompensate by letting go too much, and it can leave the body in a kind of a vulnerable state because it's letting go of all its protective mechanisms. So I would really recommend people to take it easy then. It is natural that you're going to be a bit vulnerable. You're taking the armoring away. So you obviously don't want to go into a situation where armoring is required, right?
So you talk about the de-armoring,
Yes.
and you use the word vulnerability, and like in business, that requires a lot of trust between client and practitioner, in your case, healthcare practitioner.
Yes.
And so I guess when someone does start the BSR journey, it's got to feel right for them.
Yes.
And the connection between practitioner and the client has to be one based on trust.
Yes, and I think actually for any healing modality really, you've got to really resonate with the person. Sometimes you just feel at home with the person and you're able to open up. That is what healing is opening up, letting go of protection, whatever that may be. You know, if you don't resonate with one practitioner, find somebody where you do, or find a modality where you do resonate, where you are able to feel that trust. Because in the beginning I said the cell, the organism, the tissue, it can be closed off or it can be open. It can't be open and closed. And when we require healing, it needs to open up. It needs to be able to grow through the stresses. And it can't do that if it's closed.
So Ralph, defense mechanisms and stresses increase in times of uncertainty, which we saw quite a lot of in 2020 in our financial space, in our personal spaces, and I guess for many people emotionally, right? So for example, the mental health aspect became quite a priority during 2020. If we were to think about, we're in 2021 now, everyone has New Year's resolution. The office is potentially a thing of the past, or the office is going to be in a limited capacity. And then also our movements at the moment are currently restricted. What 3 or 5 tips do you have for people to cope with stresses during 2021, be it work from home or mentally with a concept of living in a more restricted world until the pandemic is over?
Well, the first thing I would definitely say is that, you know, we have technology now, and our most overriding, the first stresses that we need to deal with as babies when we're growing up, the newborn baby, it gets its cues socially from its parents. So socially, if we are not happy socially, then it's difficult to handle stress as well. So I would definitely say that even though we are maybe isolated a bit, we can use technology to still keep good relationships with either family or friends, because we need to feel safe in the world. And if we don't have that social interaction where we're okay to be who we are, then we can sort of feel distanced from the world, and that isolation, I don't think that's it can lead to other mental problems. So I would definitely say keep still connected in other ways. The other thing that, because we're now working at home, there can be a little bit of a grey area between work and home life. And what can happen is that our work starts intruding more and more time in our life. And the more it takes, the less time the body has then to switch off from the stresses of work. So definitely try to at least have some time where you do switch off from work. Really switch off so that your body can recuperate. The other thing, you know, at work, when we have a desk and we have a chair and everything is sorted out for us ergonomically to sit at our desk, At home, we want to work on our bed and, lounge on the sofa. And actually, those can form physical stresses on the body in that we're not posturally in the best position possible. And definitely, I would say, try to find ways in which, at least sitting correctly, even failing that, maybe move in between working so that you're not working 5 hours at a time on the sofa, bent forward, rather spend half an hour here, half an hour there, half an hour there, or also have a desk which you then keep for work. Those are some of the simple things I would definitely recommend people to do.
Yes, so Ralph, an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you for sharing your time and your knowledge with us today. And with the listeners' permission, we might need to unpack this conversation a little bit more and get to understand the various aspects of mind, body, soul as it relates to BSR that Ralph was referring to. So Ralph, just to recap on those contact details again, WhatsApp number?
Is 082 564 0594, and the website is ralphdinkelman.co.za.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ralph. And thank you, listeners, for joining us and sharing your time with us this afternoon. We hope that you've taken away some tips and aspects and have a better understanding of body stress release as something that you might want to consider for your optimal wellness and health. Take care, stay well, and we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.